Welcome to the Midnight Bible Study. Maybe you're hurting. Maybe you're wondering, does God even exist? Does he even care? I'm going to give you proof. I'm going to give you proof that not only that God exists, but that God loves you beyond all comprehension, just beyond all comprehension. Okay, start off first. The proof that God exists. Now, I'm not going to look to God to prove that God exists. I'm going to look to you to prove God exists. The human body contains around 50 to 100 trillion cells, and they vary widely in size, structure, and use. So just think about this. How did that happen? Think about that. We're not talking about a car. A car, for example, has, let's say it has 30,000 parts. Does that just come together because somebody threw it in a swamp and lightning struck the swamp and, a Porsche drives out of the swamp? No, that's not going to happen. If you threw all those pre-made parts, and by the way, who would make them? But let's say we threw all those pre-made parts in the swamp. Are they going to drive out in a Porsche when lightning strikes? Like in Darwinism? No, that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is those parts are going to corrode and rust, and that's what's going to happen. No, it's too complicated. You're going to need a mechanic to put together that car, or a factory, an assembly line to put together that car. So who put you together with 50 to 100 trillion parts? Okay, 100. Not a car, which is a ridiculously simple thing compared to you. You're a vehicle of 150 to 100 trillion cells. Okay, so that didn't just happen because some slop fell into the swamp and lightning hit, or some simple cell that got complicated over time. That doesn't happen. So that's the first thing. You are literally the greatest miracle in the world. There's nothing more spectacular and amazing than a human being. And that didn't just happen. That happened because of a creator, which is even more amazing, actually beyond belief. So incredible. People, what is a cell anyway? If we're made up of 50 to 100 trillion cells, well, what is a cell? Well, we can think of cells as tiny little packages that contain factories, little micro factories. Literally, think of a micro factory inside a cell. Little warehouses. They move themselves. They're little transport systems, and they have their own power. They're power plants. They produce power. Wow, that's complicated. That means not only do we have 50 trillion cells, but every one of them is like a little factory, a self-sustaining power plant that has a specific purpose and does that specific purpose day and night for your entire lifetime. If you're looking for miracles, just look in the mirror. There's no greater miracle you'll ever see than just looking in the mirror. Just look in the mirror until we get to heaven. We're not going to see any miracle greater than that. So, how many types are these cells all identical? Well, there's 200 types of cells. There's 200 types of cells. So not only imagine we have these 50 trillion. Okay, there's 200 different types of mini factories inside of So you divide, these 50 trillion cells by 200 different types. All of them perfect. All of them absolutely spectacular. All of them minutely crafted to exact specifications. Every bit of it. It all works day and night. Okay, just look to your beating heart. It beats day and night for your entire life. It pumps blood. It pumps your blood. Nearly every cell in a person's body has the same DNA. Okay, the information stored in the DNA is stored as code. It's made up of 4 chemical bases, and it's stored as code. Okay, who's the coder? Who did the coding? We know that it wasn't some techie because, who was the original coder? Who was the one who coded the original DNA? That takes an intellect beyond belief. It takes an incredible intellect to do that. Now, the order sequence of these base chemicals determines the information available for building and maintaining an organism, similar to the way in which letters of the alphabet appear in a certain order to form words and sentences, according to medicineplus.gov. So this is it's complicated, and everything is perfectly ordered. There's nothing random here. It's not like there was an earthquake and some lizard crawled out of the swamp and then it turned in miraculously. It just poof turned into a human being, or let's say maybe over billions of years transformed. No, a lizard is still a lizard. If you've looked around, the last time I saw a lizard, they were still lizards. Last time I saw an ape, they were still apes. I haven't seen any half ape, half men lately, or ever for that matter. No, people are people. That's how it works. And they're very complicated DNA in its perfect order. Now, an important property of DNA is that it can replicate. So DNA actually can replicate itself. Well, how does that happen? It's incredible. It's miraculous. It can replicate itself and make copies of itself. Each strand of DNA in the double helix can serve as a pattern for duplicating sequences, the sequence of bases. So all of this just shows how incredible you are. Just look at your eyes. How did that happen? Was that like was that, have you ever seen frog eggs? They're like clear. They look like clear jelly in the swamp. You can find those in a swamp. Well, how did this ape or whatever this creature get? How did we get eyes? All right, was that like some frog eggs that like turned into eyes miraculously? Of course not. That's ridiculous. But the eyes are incredibly complicated, and for them to happen is an absolute miracle. Just the eyes, never mind the lungs, the heart, the blood, the DNA, the brain, everything, the nerves. It all happens as a sequence of a multiplication of simultaneous miracles and self-perpetuating miracles that not only brings you into life, but carries throughout. There's nothing that's ever been seen like you. God loves you with incredible attention to details. I've written, I've written like 40 novels. I've published 28 of them. And as a creator, I like my novels. Not everybody likes action thriller novels, but I do. I love them, and I'm proud of what I made. And God is proud of what He made. I'm confident, which is you. So, and every one of His creations, He loves what He's done. So that's just one way we know that God. Not only do we know that God exists, because if we have a creation, we have a creator. That's just the way it works. You don't have random stuff happening. We don't have, if you got 200 types of cells, if you walked into a factory and there was 200 different types of computers, like they're all programmed differently with different features, you don't say, oh, well, this happened because there was a swamp and then an earthquake and some lightning, and now we have these 200 computers. That would be ridiculous. Way too complicated, extremely unlikely. You wouldn't even get one computer part out of that process. No. You would say, obviously, this was created. Somebody may have put this all together. And that is incredibly simple. That's elementary, grade school level simple compared to you. So that doesn't mean it's easy to get through life. We're hurting, but God loves us, and His strength is perfected in our weakness. We learn that in the Bible. Sure, we're hurting, just as Paul was hurting when he begged God to take that thorn out of his flesh, whatever that was, a health issue of some sort, an affliction of some sort. And he begged God, take it away from me, I'm suffering. And God said, no, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. So if we're hurting, we need to turn to God with all our heart, because He loves us. And our weakness is, in a sense, something that we can take some comfort in, because God's strength is perfected in our weakness. It draws us to God, and God comes in and helps us and gives us strength and companionship and mercy and love at a level that we couldn't see otherwise. There was a martyr saint who was in a underneath a castle in the cellar. What do they call that? Down underneath the castle. It's not a cellar, but it's down in, anyway. He's down underneath in whatever that room is underneath the castle, where they have the torture devices and things. Well, this was like a prison underneath the castle, and it was full of Christians who were being basically tortured and starved to death. And this one martyr saint was sitting there looking around, and he saw all these dying, suffering saints and Christians, and they were moaning in agony and in pain. And he was sitting there. He was in as much agony and pain as the rest of them. But he said, "You know what? I've never been more full of God in my life. I've never been more full of the Spirit of God. And I'm surrounded by misery, and yet I'm happy. I've never been so fulfilled in my life because the Spirit of God was with him in his weakness. God's strength was perfected in his weakness." He said, "Jesus is right here with me, comforting me, giving me joy and consolation." So yeah, we're suffering. It's not easy to be a highly complicated piece of machinery with a soul, and to get through a complicated world when we're under attack through the dark side. We're under attack, and we have to pay very close attention. So yes, God loves us. All we have to do to know that is just look in the mirror. God bless you. Good night from the Midnight Bible Study.